Sego, Dehawanak ko yung gets. My name is Wesley Miller, and I'm from Six Nations territory. I'm Onondaga Beaver Clan. The group I've chosen is the institution where I currently attend culinary school, and I've decided to do my decolonization and indigenization project on this institution. Um, so for my project, I'm just going to go through the questions and answer them as I go. Describe an action or actions of decolonization that would help this group become more inclusive of Indigenous people and that challenges the Western paradigm. So, one of the things that could be done to decolonize the institution would be to incorporate more culinary methodologies and recipes and ingredients from different cultures around the world, specifically Indigenous cultures. This would create a more inclusive atmosphere, and the curriculum would be more beneficial to Indigenous people who are taking the program. Um, this this could happen either on the institution itself, or we could fund a satellite um, campus located on the reserve on Six Nations territory that would cater towards Indigenous cuisine for the Six Nations community, but it would be open to people from all walks of life. But the curriculum would be essentially focused on Indigenous cuisine and Indigenous methodologies. Describe an action or actions of indigenization that would help this group become more inclusive of Indigenous people and that shifts focus leadership towards Indigenous ways of knowing. So, some ideas for indigenization for this program could include incorporating field trips while also incorporating guest speakers and having demonstrations on traditional methodologies with Indigenous cuisine. For example, the nixtamalization process of corn, in which we boil corn in a lye solution to create lied corn, which is also known as hominy. We could also talk about the various methodologies of drying and preserving different foods, as well as smoking wild meats. We could also incorporate foraging as an activity. We could make a class that focuses on teaching people how to identify plants, when to harvest them, how to cook them the best ways for processing and drying and preserving the things that people forage. Another idea would be to focus on Indigenous agriculture, such as the Three Sisters crops and the various crops that were grown by the, not, I'm Haudenosaunee, but we could also incorporate the different methodologies of various Indigenous tribes throughout North America, including the Anishinaabe, the West Coast, the Inuit. This would go a long way in indigenizing the culinary institution. So explain your plan or action in terms of what takes place and how others will interact with the activity. Where does the activity take place? Is it related to any special period of time? How are you involved? So I've sort of already answered that question, but like I said, you could either indigenize the current existing program that's in the city, or you could open a satellite institution on Six Nations territory that would cater to the community, and it would be more accessible for members of the community. It could incorporate various methodologies that are employed by our people regarding growing food, our agriculture, foraging food, hunting, and then preserving and smoking a lot of food. It would include everybody, so you wouldn't have to be Indigenous to take this program, but the curriculum itself would focus on Indigenous cuisine and methodologies. Think about the five senses. What symbols, images, artifacts, physical objects, artwork, videos, or multimedia will your plan or action include? How do those things fit with the senses? How do they relate to Indigenous peoples and or Indigenous worldviews? So like I already mentioned, we could incorporate field trips and guest speakers and demonstrations This would engage the five senses. That way, people could actually see and smell and taste and touch um, the various foods and methodologies, and they can learn what to expect, what things are supposed to smell and look like, uh, and they can learn how to do these processes properly, the way that our ancestors have done them for thousands of years. Find appropriate references to back up your ideas and plans. I don't have references for this project. I'm basically using all of my own knowledge. I was an Mohawk language educator for about 6 years before I decided to add another aspect to my career and become a chef. Um, I also worked as a sous chef in an indigenous cuisine restaurant in Six Nations. Uh, I was raised in a community where we relied a lot on foraging and hunting because we were essentially poor, so we had to rely a lot on the food that we could find and grow and hunt because we don't have grocery stores on the reserve, and my mother throughout my life never had a vehicle, so we relied on other means to sustain ourselves. So I don't have any references for this. I'm just basically using my own life skills and knowledge that I've learned throughout my life and the various disciplines that I have worked in. Describe your experiences or desired outcomes. Were you looking for increased awareness, a change in group functioning, change or revision to a particular project, ongoing activism? So the desired outcome would be that we could create more indigenous chefs, we could promote and spread awareness about indigenous foods and crops. By doing this, we could inspire people to take up the art of farming and seed keeping and hunting and fishing and foraging and the various methodologies that go along with that. And then all of that knowledge would be transmitted, and we would not be at risk of losing that information. As it stands, there are not that many people in our communities who know a lot of this stuff. A lot of the times you have to go to specific knowledge keepers to learn this stuff because it's not available in schools, it's not available in institutions. But if we were to make it available, make it accessible, then we could ensure the continuation of this knowledge and the preservation of the recipes, the methodologies, and all of the history behind it. How will you evaluate the effectiveness of your action or actions? Please describe what questions you might ask and how you will invite the answers. To evaluate the effectiveness of the action, one way would be to monitor student success upon completion of the program, to stay in touch and to measure how well they succeed in the industry afterwards. We could also use the various like the crops and the plants that we grow and that we forage. We could evaluate how prevalent it has become from the day that we started to, like a year later, 2 years later, 3 years later, and see how much more prevalent those things are becoming within our community and elsewhere. And the availability of information that'll be available out, just anywhere, like out in the industry, out in the community, out in the cities, even online. We could also evaluate our students based on a performance system rather than a testing system like the Western system uses. We could have like group demonstrations and then presentations where the students demonstrate the things that they've learned, and they would be graded on like a rubric system based on how well they paid attention to the demonstrations and followed along with instructions and absorbed the information that was shared. And That's it for my project. My name is Wesley Miller. My traditional name is Dehawanakwa. I'm from Six Nations of the Grand River Territory, and I am Onondaga Beaver Clan. Thank you very much for watching. Thank you. Goodbye.